Welcome to EDD 918, Module 4, Lecture 4, and finishing up our unit here on organizational structures, specifically looking at hierarchies and decision-making within organizations. And so we've talked about those structures. We've talked about how decision-making works in an organization from the standpoint of it may not be as obvious. It may not be reflected in the organizational chart. Parts of it are, parts of it aren't. And then we talked the last couple of times about the characteristics of effective decision-making in an organization. And so now what I want to talk about for this final lecture is the ladder of inference. And this is a tool that a lot of individuals have written about, talked about it. It's a very practical thing. In fact, I'll be honest, this is probably one of the most practical things that I've ever learned about in my years in corporate training and development, doing workshops, things like that. It was taught to me, and I have found it very, very helpful myself. And I've taught it to a lot of people that have also echoed that it's helpful to them. And so I want to share with you, and you'll notice there's just and I'm looking up there, that's where I have my notes, a slide that says the ladder of inference. So in a minute, I'm going to tell you what I would encourage you to do to take notes on this section. But I want to point this out. And by the way, the ladder of inference was first conceptualized by a guy named Chris Argyris, and an organizational scholar who wrote about these things. But some people have called the ladder of inference, and I think I even referred to it as a decision-making tool. I don't know that I would say that. The way I term the ladder of inference is it is a descriptive model rather than a prescriptive model. It is not telling us how we should make decisions. Really what it's telling us is, from Chris Argyris' standpoint, he's saying this is how we do make decisions. Now, by knowing how we arrive at conclusions and take actions, then we can use the knowledge of the ladder of inference to make better decisions or to know how we're arriving at conclusions and check ourselves. So it is a helpful tool from that standpoint. But I just want to point that out because sometimes I would teach this in workshops and I would have leaders say, that's it. We need to start using the ladder of inference as how we will make decisions. And I was always quick to say, well, no. This is how you make decisions. And like anything else, it's I can make really bad decisions with the ladder of inference, and I can make really good ones. But am I considering what's going on? And that's the value of the ladder of inference. It gives us a mental image to think about how we arrive at conclusions and make decisions, and so that hopefully we can make better ones. So let's talk about that a little bit. Let's talk about the ladder of inference. So here's what I would encourage you to do. On a piece of paper, maybe on, if you print it out the slide deck or if you want to do it electronically, but on a piece of paper, you want to draw a ladder. And you need, 5 rungs on your ladder. So that's what you want to do. 5 rungs, a ladder with 5 rungs. And at the bottom, not on the first rung, but even below the first rung, write the word data with some arrows pointing up. Because here's the deal. We are bombarded with lots of data in our lives. I don't think anyone's surprised about that. And by data, I mean any kind of stimulus, information. So I'm not just talking about data as in hard facts and statistics and things like that. Literally, we're bombarded with all kinds of data. Think about when you drive down the road. As you're driving down the road, you might have the radio on. The phone might be buzzing, but you're not looking at it because, it's not safe. But it's buzzing. The radio's on. There's other cars and people. You've got billboards. They even change now. So that's what, if you've got people with you, they might be talking. If it's kids, they're telling you all about their day, whatever. Lots and lots of data is coming at us constantly, and we have to have a way of processing and thinking through it. And so that first rung of the ladder, so data is underneath, and it's, the arrows are pointing up, and on that first rung, write this: select data. The first step in decision making, in how we make decisions, is we select particular data, and at that point we own it. It becomes ours, meaning now we've got to do something with that data. But we don't select all of the data around us. We filter a lot of it out. Our brains are made to do that. And we could spend a lot of time talking about the variety of filters that are out there that help us think through it. Some are good, some are bad. For instance, all of us have the confirmation filter, meaning we allow information in that affirms or confirms a previously held belief. Best illustration of that would be, currently we are in a presidential election year. And as individuals, if they haven't already selected their candidate, and this will only increase over the next few months as we move towards the election day, data will be given that either puts our chosen candidate in a positive light or in a negative light. And what we're predisposed to do is the information that makes our candidate look good, we will accept. The information that makes him look bad, we reject. Or if it's the opponent, if it makes him or her look bad, we will accept that. And if it makes him or her look good, we will reject it, right? Why are we doing that? Because we want to be affirmed that we have chosen the right candidate. And so we're only going to believe the good stuff about our person. That's an example. And another example would be just the awareness filter. And probably the best example of this or illustration of this would be if you probably have, if you've ever experienced the awakening, as I call it, that said that there's a certain make and model of car out there. What I mean by that is this: I remember my first car that I had was a 1981 Honda Prelude, and it was amazing how many people in Lancaster County, Nebraska, purchased 81 Honda Preludes on the same day that I did. Right? Obviously not, but I hadn't been aware of them until then. Then all of a sudden, whoa, there's a lot of Honda Preludes, and they don't even make them anymore, I don't think. But there's a lot of Honda Preludes out here on the road. Why? Because that car, make and model, now made it through my filter, and so now I'm aware of them. Whereas they were always there, I just didn't pay attention to them before. That's that idea. So we filter out a lot of data. We really do. But then we select some of it, we bring it in, and now we have to do something with it. And so then the next level up, the next rung up on that ladder is we analyze data. We analyze that data. And at that point, what we're really deciding ultimately is, are we going to do anything further with this data? So we've selected it. It made it through the filter. So we own it. We need to do something with it. And then that next level is now to analyze it and kind of say, is this important for me to really digest and process and think about and make a decision on? So some data makes it through. For instance, I'm driving down the road and all of a sudden I see, oh, there's another Honda Prelude like mine. Interesting. So it made it through the filter. It became my data. I needed to do something with it. But at the analysis step, now I kind of chuck it, right? Because, interesting. There's another, or you may have had this experience. I've had it when I've been in other parts of the country. And all of a sudden I see someone with like a Nebraska t-shirt on or something. It's particularly like we were on vacation in Hawaii a couple of years ago, and I didn't get a chance to talk to him because they were at a distance. But I look up and all of a sudden there's this guy decked out in Husker gear, and we're in Honolulu, Hawaii. We're a long way from home. It's not like we're over in Council Bluffs, Iowa. I expect to see it neighboring states. We're in Honolulu, Hawaii. Whoa, that made it through my filter. Now, he was too far away. I couldn't talk to him. So it was a, Isn't that interesting? There's another Nebraska guy here in Honolulu. And then I check it, right? And so that's what I mean by we're now analyzing it. Do I need to do something with it from a decision making perspective, or is it just interesting, right? And so we analyze it. Now, assuming that we have still held on to that information, that data, that stimuli, whatever it is, we now move into the next rung up. So we should be third rung up. First rung is select data, because the data is underneath and it's coming up. We select the data, we own it, we got to do something with it. Next rung up is we analyze that data. Do I need to take it further, or is it just kind of an interesting, who to thunk it kind of thing? We take it further, we move up to the third rung, which the third rung is the word interpret. Interpret. I'm now going to interpret this information, this data that I have. How do I interpret the data? What goes into my interpretation? And so off to the side, if you will, draw a little arrow out there and write assumptions, beliefs, background, experiences, culture. You could probably add a lot more things within that realm. You get where I'm going with it. But beliefs, assumptions, background, experiences are kind of the really big things. Values, you could maybe put values in there. All of those things are going to come into my interpretation of this data, of this information. That's all going to play a part in what interpretation I make about this data and this information. And so that's where, well, we'll come back to that. That's going to be what ties into my interpretation. And then we move into the next step. So now fourth rung up is conclude. I now draw a conclusion based on this information, this data. Based on my interpretation, I draw a conclusion about this information. And then the final step, the top rung, the fifth rung, is act. I'm going to take action, and we're going to talk about those possible actions here in just a minute. So I take action, and by the way, action doesn't necessarily mean an actual behavior observable. It might be just an action, as in my thought. I come to a decision about what I'm going to believe or hold true about this information. It might be an action, a decision to take an action of some kind, but you get the idea. Now, here's what we need to do. So again, hopefully you recognize that this is a descriptive model. We do this all the time, and the reality is it happens like this. It seems like this was a very slow process. It took almost 15 minutes to talk through it. But the reality is we make decisions like that. We arrive at conclusions. Just pick a controversial topic and throw it out there. I'll give you an example. Coronavirus and the response to it. You immediately arrived at some sort of thought, action, decision that quickly just by hearing those words. You may have arrived at the action, thought, conclusion that we didn't take enough precautions. We should have done more. We should have been sooner. Or you may have arrived at the conclusion, decision that you feel like it was kind of overblown and we overreacted. Or maybe you arrived at the conclusion, action, decision point. Your thoughts immediately went to the impact on the healthcare environment and things like that. Or you may have immediately gone to the economic impact and thought about small businesses who had to shut down, or friends who lost their jobs, and the economic aspect of it. Maybe you went to the impact on you personally as you had to shift all of your courses from face to face to online, and now still wondering, as I'm recording this, wondering what's going to happen, for fall classes and things like that. So, point being, and I'm not, saying good, bad, indifferent on any of those, but depending on where you're coming from, that's what impacts actions, thoughts, decisions, things like that in regards to that statement of the coronavirus and our reaction to it. And so here's what we want to do now we get into the prescriptive. How does this help us then? Well, it's an awareness. And so where we want to pause is because we arrive at decisions very quickly. What we want to do is, it's called suspending our certainty. Because most of us, when we make a decision, boy, we're certain about it. Why? Well, because the smartest person in the room made that decision, right? Me. Being facetious. But we're very certain, and it's like, this is it. This is the right idea, right concept. So we want to suspend our certainty, and we want to walk back down the ladder. We want to take a couple of rungs down. So we find ourselves at that action standpoint, and now we want to drop down 2 rungs, back down to the interpret rung. And then we go off to the side, and what we want to do is we want to pause and ask ourselves, okay, what are the assumptions, the beliefs, the values, the experiences that I am bringing into this situation that have led me to conclude and to make the decision potentially that I am leaning towards, or that I think I'm going to make, or this conclusion that I've drawn? Why have I arrived at that conclusion? And I think through that. And so, for instance, if using the coronavirus, and maybe it's a bit of a panicky feeling, not from the virus itself, but thinking, oh man, this was, I don't know if I can teach online again. I don't know if I can handle this. I don't know if I can do all of this. Whoa, wait a minute. Why am I feeling so panicky about this? Let me back down the ladder. Okay, what led me to conclude that this is, that this is a terrible thing? Okay, well, because of my experience, because I had to shift halfway through the semester from a face-to-face to an online course. Okay, but I've already done that. And I survived. It was rough. And I'm not, I really want to teach face-to-face. That would be my goal. That would be that's what I want. That's what I love doing. But if I can't, I can get through it, right? And so now you're doing self-talk and you're coaching yourself, things like that, and you get where I'm going. But instead of going into the panic mode, I back myself down that ladder and go, whoa, why am I panicking so much about this? Why am I having this strong of a reaction? This works in our interpersonal relationships. If you've ever found yourself in a meeting and you're talking through things, and Jane over here says something, and I'm like, instantly I'm set off. Oh, I can't believe she said that. Oh, why? Well, maybe she disagreed with my thought on something. At that point, that's where, and this is where I found it helpful, I stop, and in my mind, I'm doing this all mentally. I'm going, whoa, wait a minute. Why am I having that stronger reaction, Jane? And I back myself down the ladder. I'm like, okay, what did she say that I interpreted, how did I interpret what she said that caused me to get angry with her, or to think she's opposed to me? Because, here's the deal. I know Jane. She's competent. She's professional. She's very intelligent. We've actually agreed on more things than we've disagreed on. She just disagreed with me on these one things. But what is it that she said? Well, she said this, made this statement, and that kind of set me off because, and I'm thinking through. I'm backing myself down so that then I can go, when I'm ready to take action, instead of now turning to Jane and being like, wow, what do you mean you disagree? And coming at her, I've now backed myself down. I've thought through, okay, here's what she said. Here's how I interpret it. You know what I need to do? I need to clarify what she meant by that, because I thought she was on board with this idea or whatever. So hopefully, I know I'm kind of speaking a little bit ambiguous there because these are just examples, but hopefully that's helping you see how we can arrive at good actions. Now, here are the two actions that we potentially can take. I mean, I guess there's more than that, but really, and so at the top of your ladder, draw one arrow off to one side, doesn't really matter which side, and write advocacy. Advocacy. And then to the other side, draw an arrow and write inquiry. And on the advocacy side, I want you to draw an arrow pointing down. And on the inquiry side, I want you to point an arrow going up towards the word advocacy. Towards the word inquiry, sorry. So you have advocacy on one side, inquiry on the other side. Advocacy, you draw an arrow going down. Inquiry, you draw an arrow going up. Okay? So here's where I'm going with this, and we'll be done here in just a couple minutes. As I arrive at my conclusions and I decide to take action, one of those actions I can take is to move into advocacy. That means I am now going to advocate for my position, my decision, my conclusion. Advocacy is not a bad thing. In fact, sometimes advocacy is the best choice. Why? But here's what you want to be sure before you move into advocacy is you've backed down the ladder and you've thought, you know what? Here's what I'm doing to interpret. I've analyzed this data. I've interpreted it. I've drawn this conclusion, and here's the action I'm going to take. This is the decision I think we need to make, and I'm now going to advocate for that decision. As long as you've thought through it, advocacy can be a good position to take. And the reason we have the arrow going down is this, and this is a key part of the advocacy. I am now going to share my thought processes with the rest of the group. If I'm the leader with my team, if I'm part of the group with the rest of the group, I'm going to share with them how I arrived at the decision that I did. Here's what went into my thought processes. Here's how I interpreted this data. And then I invite them to ask me clarifying questions so I can further explain my ideas. And by the way, it's all in how you ask the question, right? It's not, so do you agree with me? Especially if you're the leader. Do you agree with me or not? Bad question to ask. What part of this is unclear? And or hey, if I, what concerns you about my decision? And you may even need to prime the pump a little bit and say, if I were you, here's something that would be concerning me. Oh yeah, that would, and then the conversation will go. The key here is to have dialogue, by the way. That's ultimately where we're leading, so that we have back and forth exchange and dialogue. But I'm advocating, but I'm explaining my position. I'm explaining my thought processes. I'm making it plain for all to see, so that the rest of the group can understand where I'm coming from, and then they can help think through and say, oh yeah, I agree with you, or you know what? You said that you interpreted the data this way. I interpreted it differently. And now we can have a discussion, we can have dialogue. The inquiry side comes in when I've analyzed, I've interpreted, but my action is inquiry in that I'm not 100% sure what my decision is. So I don't know. And so inquiry is then where I am asking questions of others who maybe have arrived at decisions, and I'm asking them clarifying questions. And it's questions of, help me understand. And that's not necessarily a good question to ask, because you can ask that very negatively. Help me understand how you arrived at that, right? I mean, that can come across, but that's really what I'm seeking to do. I'm looking for more understanding, more insight, because I'm not 100% sure. And I think you can even lead with that and say, you know what? I'm not 100% sure how I feel about this or what decision I've arrived at, but it seems like you have a really good position. So maybe the other person's in advocacy, and you're in inquiry. And you say, so tell me more. tell me more about how you arrived at this decision. Tell me more what went into your thought processes, how you interpreted the data and things like that. And as the leader, it's very important that, again, you ask the questions in the right way. I worked with one leader, and she really was trying to implement better inquiry and encourage her team to do more thinking. But so I had taught her the ladder of inference in a workshop, and she was working hard to help, refine her own thinking, walk down the ladder, because her feedback, one of the things that she tended to do, she's a very strong leader, and so she would tend to just come into her meetings and, guys, here's the decision I've made, here's what we need to do, and this is what we're doing. And there was very little democracy going on among her team, and so she'd gotten that feedback, and she wanted to work on it. She really did. But so we did this in the workshop, and she'd worked on it. It had been a couple of weeks, and so we were having our follow-up meeting, and she said, "Oh, Ryan, I'm really struggling with this." And I said, "Okay, tell me more. What's going on?" And she said, "I'm trying that inquiry thing, and it's just not working. It's just shutting them down." I said, "Okay, fair enough. Tell me, I said, "Are you asking them, questions, about how the decisions they've arrived at?" She said, "Oh, yeah, I'm asking, but they just kind of shut down." I said, "Well, tell me what questions you're asking." She goes, "Well, when they tell me the decision they've made, I look at them and I say, well, what were you thinking when you made that decision?" Okay, let's work on presentation, right? And so then from there, we started working on how to ask the right kind of question, because her spirit was right, but the way it was coming across is, boy, you're an idiot. What were you thinking, right? And so we want to ask it the right way. But this is the ladder of inference. So I hope this has been helpful to you to see, again, this is a descriptive model of how we make decisions. We make decisions in this way. But we can make better decisions individually and collectively if we agree to back ourselves down the ladder, take a little bit of time, pause, reflect, how did I arrive at this? And then decide, am I moving into advocacy or inquiry? Both are fine. What we don't want to do is become adversarial, right? Draw a line in the sand. This is, put your dukes up. We're going to fight it out. Advocacy is still open. I'm just pretty confident, but I want to make sure I explain my thinking. Inquiries, I'm not really sure, but I want to understand more. So that's what we want to do in our decision-making processes. So this one's been a little bit longer, but hopefully it's been helpful to you, and we will see you in Module 5.